welcome to the Better Together podcast, where we talk about what we can do to enhance our ministry and more effectively serve the Lord. Today I have with us Dr. Brad Ransom. He is the Chief Training Officer for North American Ministries, Free Will Baptist North American Ministries. He has been working with church planting and for some 30-plus years. He's from Oklahoma, and he's been here in Nashville, Tennessee. How long have you been here, Brad?
6.5 years.
All right, so it's so good to have Dr. Brad Ransom with us today, and you may be wondering why we would have someone that trains church planners talking to all people, whether you're out there a pastor of a church that's 200 years old or you're just a regular attender at a church. You may wonder, well, what is it that he can give to me? And so today I think he has a lot of information that he can give us about how to be a welcoming church. And so he has spent a lot of time trying to prepare our new church plants to be welcoming, but all of us need to be welcoming, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Dr. Ransom, so tell us a bit about what we can do as churches to be welcoming churches.
Yeah, well, back a good number of years ago, after I left the pastorate and began traveling among our churches, it's been a dozen years ago now, one of the things that I noticed is most churches think they're friendly, but the truth is that really most churches are friendly to people they know, and they're friendly to themselves, friendly to each other, but they're really not that welcoming to guests. And as I've been a guest at a lot of churches over these past 12, 13 years that I've been traveling and visiting churches, just discovered that more and more. And so just really feel like there's a need for our churches to realize, that we do need to be welcoming in more ways than we often think about.
The Tom Rainer's book, Becoming a Welcoming Church, that's one of the things he talks about. And he talks about the stand and greet time, which I suspect you have had some standing and greeting in some of the churches you visited. Is that a good thing?
Yeah, the stand and greet time is generally a good time for people that are members of the church or regular attenders, because it's comfortable for them to say hi to their friends and people that they know. But something that I have personally observed and I've personally witnessed is during that stand and greet time, a lot of times people are turning and greeting and even leaving their pew, greeting folks they know, while guests and first-time attenders often stand awkwardly by themselves. And so I know a lot of churches do that because they need transition time or whatever. And so there's really two things that I say about a stand and greet time. If you do one, which personally I think it's better just not to do the stand and greet time, but if you need to do one and you are just, going to do one, then the first thing I say is just keep it short. I mean, 30 seconds to 1 minute is plenty of time. If it stretches into 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes sometimes, it's just really awkwardly long for people that are not comfortable with the surroundings. And then the second thing is to train your people how to greet guests. And that's really one of the most important things that I hope we can get time to talk about.
Yes.
But just how to train your people to be more inviting and more welcoming to guests.
That's good. So first off, let's go ahead and take that stand and greet time real well. So like in Rainer's research, 9 out of 10 of visitors said that it was very awkward. You've talked about how you felt it was awkward visiting churches. I'll tell you, today I visit our churches where a lot of the people will know me, so it's not such an issue. I will say one of the most awkward times I ever had, though, was visiting a church. It wasn't a Free Will Baptist church, but it was, we won't say what it was. But anyway, a church when we were on vacation. They did the stand and greet time. People were nice and friendly, but wow, did it get awkward as the time clicked by. We had a stand and greet time originally at our church, but as new people would get saved and come into the church, I learned how hard it was for them to come to the church or come to any church the first time. And we actually had a fellow who ended up becoming a deacon, but he described the stand and greet time as torture, just pure torture. So we really want to think that through, and it sounds like you were about to get into that, preparing our own church members for how they can greet.
Right.
And one of the things to do is just put yourself in the shoes of visitor, someone that doesn't know anyone there, and think how you would feel. So take that away a little bit. Tell us about what we need to do to be welcoming to people as they come to our church.
Yeah. Well, there's, of course, a lot of things that would be difficult to cover in this short amount of time that we'll have, but some of the main things that we talk about in our training when we do this training with church planners and even pastors, and even when I was a pastor, some of the things we talked about was learning how to ask good questions and teaching our people, all of our regular attenders. So we had designated greeters. We had a greeter list. We had people assigned to the front door, to the back door, and all that sort of thing. We also had what we called hosts, and they were separate from greeters, but they had specific jobs. But in most churches, even though we designate certain people as greeters, I say that we need to train all of our people to be greeters. And they may not be assigned to a door, they may not be assigned to a location in the building, but every person needs to be a greeter. They need to be trained on good questions to ask, ways to engage guests in conversation, language to use and not to use when you're talking to guests. Just even basic things about never just tell somebody where something is, but offer to take them. If they don't know where the nursery is and they need to take their children to the nursery, offer to lead them there. Or instead of just saying, oh, it's down the hall to the left. And, and a lot of our churches are confusing, they're especially for first-time guests. And so just training your people to engage with people. If they don't know who a person is, stop. Ask them their name. Ask them, "Are you new here?" And that's a good way to a good phrase that we use. We talk about a lot. Instead of saying, "Is this your first time?" or whatever, because that's always awkward. And I have a personal story about that. I was on a staff at a church years ago, and I wasn't the lead pastor, but I was a staff pastor. But I was always in children's church, and so I didn't know a lot of the people that came on Sunday morning. And I greeted a couple out on the sidewalk in front of the church one morning and said, "Oh, is this your first time here?" And they said, "No, we've been going here for years." And it kind of offended them that I said that. And so I like to use the phrase "new." Are you new here?
Yes.
And so that, if a person's been there once or twice or three times, yeah, maybe they are still new here. And it just opens a conversation, an opportunity for conversation. So that way you have an opportunity to get their name, even if they've been there a few times and you've missed their name or whatever. It's always awkward to kind of figure out, how do I, ask them their name. I know they've been here before. I should know it, but I don't know it. And so, are you new here? Or I didn't get your name, or just teach your people some very simple questions that they can ask. And so a lot of times too, in just saying, good morning, a lot of our greeters just say good morning, hand them a bulletin, shake their hand, open the door for them, whatever. Again, train your people, all of your people, to ask good questions. What brings you to our church today? Or, do you know someone that attends here? Are you meeting someone here? Or just simple questions that you can ask people so that, it's more than just a surface level conversation, because people like to talk about themselves, and so if a guest comes to your church and you give them an opportunity to tell about their family and that sort of thing, people appreciate that. Yes. It makes them really feel more at welcome, and it kind of lowers a lot of the walls that we often have built up.
There's really a lot to unpack there. So
there is.
So one, there are designated greeters,
right.
The people that welcome them into the doors. You mentioned that. There are hosts, and hosts sound like people that would take someone to the nursery or show them the Sunday school class. And I guess, did you guys have undercover greeters as well?
No, we didn't have undercover greeters, but we did try to emphasize, all of our people, even if you're not assigned to a door or a location, to still engage people and try to, talk to people. We've all heard, different statistics about if people don't make a certain number of personal contacts or relationships within a certain length of time, it's not likely they're going to stick around at your church. And so, the front door to our assimilation of people is them learning people's names and people learning their names. And so it's, when they walk in the door the second week or the third week, or the second time they come or the third time they come, if someone can call them by name, that's going to go a long, long ways in helping that person really feel like somebody there cares about them.
And I would say for all of our folks in our churches, think about the name. So often when we meet someone for the first time, or like as a pastor, as you're meeting a lot of people, it's hard to get the names down.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things people at our church would do, if they were a greeter, they would try to get the name, and they would tend to text it to me or give it to me on a piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one Sunday, a fellow going out of the first service, and I called him by name, which he had introduced himself.
Right.
And he said, "What is your technique? How is it that you knew my name?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm working at it real hard." The
Right.
truth was, these folks had told me his
Right.
name. And so we would always try to do that. Get their name and try to get a little information, not to be an interrogator, but that's something everyone can do.
Right.
You also mentioned trying to train all the church. So there's good data that says people decide real quickly whether they're going to come back or not.
Right.
And so part of it is folks, you guys there in the pews, you see someone new, sit with them if at all possible. And there's all kinds of bad stories out there about someone saying, "Well, you're sitting in my pew,"
Right.
or "You're sitting in my chair."
Right.
It's actually kind of good to do the opposite. Folks are sitting there and you're like, "Hey, do you mind if I sit here?" And it's almost almost a play on that, like, "Oh,
Right.
they're asking us if they can
Right.
sit with us, not
Right.
kicking us out of a pew."
Right.
So we want to train as leaders. We want to train the folks that are actually the greeters, knowing where everything's at, pointing people in those directions. The host to actually walk with them and take them to wherever they need to go. And then all of us be folks that are thinking, looking around, is someone feeling comfortable? Is someone feeling uncomfortable? Do they need some particular need? And be willing to help out in that way.
Right. Another thing along with that is that we teach and we talk about having exit greeters, because a lot of times at the end of service, it's just everybody's rushing out of the building, and it's really a good opportunity to make kind of a final contact in person with a guest family before they head out the door. And so even just someone there to hand them a gift if they didn't stop by the table to pick up a gift, or however your church might handle that, what they do for first-time guests. But having exit greeters, people that are not in a hurry to get out to get to lunch or whatever, but just somebody there that's hanging around to make sure that anyone that has questions, they'll can get them answered or whatever. So
that's good.
Having exit greeters, I think, is a good practice.
So it does seem like they think the church is on fire. They run out real quickly.
Right.
And as the church leader, it's kind of hard because
Sure.
that's when someone wants to tell you, "Hey, I've got a surgery," and we have multiple people coming through, and folks feel like they don't want to slow that down. So you've got exit greeters to make contact with them, give them a welcome bag, or what kinds of things should be in the bag, or what kinds of things make good gifts to give to people that visit our church?
That's a great question. And I think it, be creative on that. I think there are some standard things that, should go without saying, but obviously you want to have some kind of a brochure that's very well done. We say something professionally done, because you don't want to make just a Xerox copy of a brochure or whatever, and so just a nice brochure with just some basic information about the church, about your children's ministry, your student ministry, your small groups, your Sunday school classes, or whatever. Just next steps for people, ways that they can become involved. Just kind of basic information. And I think some kind of a gift, whether it's a coffee mug, or and a lot of our churches do something that's kind of geographically specific. We've got a church out west that has chips and salsa. We have another church down the south that gives a bag of coffee, coffee beans. So, I mean, there's a lot of different options that you can do. But I think the main thing is just some kind of way that people can connect with your church through information and some type of next steps. What if that person really did enjoy the service? They want to learn how they can become more involved. What's the next step for them? And then just some kind of a gift. And obviously it's good to have, some kind of logoed gift, whether it's a mug or a pen or whatever. Some people, a lot of churches give even, a $5 Sonic card or a McDonald's card or really anything, just to say, we're not a church that just always asks, but we're a church that gives.
Excellent.
And so as simple as that is, and as inexpensive as that really would be, a lot of churches just don't think about giving something to a guest family that they really do appreciate.
That's good. And you mentioned the logo stuff, the calendars, the pins, the cups. People like that. They tend to use that, and it becomes advertisement almost for your church in their own home. What can we do to prepare people before they ever come to our church so that we can be more greeter-friendly, more welcoming to them?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I often tell churches when I'm dealing more with established churches and pastors is, take a Wednesday night or a Sunday night or sometime when, you're probably going to have most of your core people there, or maybe it's even in an adult Sunday school class or small group or whatever, and just talk about it. I mean, just talk about how that, our church wants to be a welcoming church. And I don't think there's anybody in any church that would argue with that. Everybody thinks that, we need to be a welcoming and a friendly church. And so just say, but I just, observing some things, I've noticed that maybe we could improve in some areas. And so just take a Wednesday night and teach your folks, just some things about, being friendly, being generous, being, good questions to ask, like I said. And so just give people some things to think about. You mentioned about the calling people by name. That means so much to people. But the truth is, most of the times when we introduce ourselves to someone or someone introduces themselves to us, the second they say their name, we couldn't repeat it.
Yeah,
it's just gone. And so we have to consciously think about that. When we introduce ourselves to somebody and we say, my name is Brad, and then you expect them to give you their name back, be in that mode to where you're in capture mode and you're going to think about that name, and then you try to relate it to something so you can remember it. And then the second they walk away, type it in your phone, write it down, send the text message, something so that you can have some way to go back and look at it. My wife is really good at that, even with our neighbors. When we meet a neighbor, she writes down their address and she writes down their first names.
That's great.
And I'm always going back to my wife and saying, hey, that neighbor across the street's out. What's their names? And she'll look on her phone. And so, then when you can call people by their name, it really does make a difference.
Helps. So it sounds like what you're saying is everyone needs to know where the nursery's at,
right,
where the different age groups are at. It sounds like it's a good idea just to even do a tour of the church, and sometimes that points out, oh no, that doesn't look very enticing, or that's kind of a turn off, so to speak, because we get used to things that need painting and so forth. And so that can kind of get us in there. I'll say one thing we did at our church, or it seems to me like people want to feel like their kids are safe. And so we had a lady, and it's probably still there at Tibbetts-chapel.com, where she walked them through the nursery. She explained how the check-in system worked. There's a couple of other nursery workers in the background, and we had some positive feedback about, hey, that made me feel like I knew them a little bit and feel like my kids would be safe. I'll also say, though, when you try to have things like that from time to time, people sometimes say, well, why do we need a name check-in thing? We all know each other here. But a visitor doesn't know that, and so they just think you're not safe. So those are things like a place that's not clean, a place that doesn't feel safe. What are some other things that are real turnoffs to our guests as they come into our churches?
Yeah, that's another great question. And I think going back to that children's thing, if I can just speak on that for a second, one of the key factors to that, I think, is C. Peter Wagner, which is a famous church growth expert in decades past. He said one of the greatest things to breaking growth barriers is for a church to structure themselves and start acting like a church of the next size. So in other words, if you're trying to break the 75 barrier, the 100 barrier, the 200 barrier, you need to put the systems in place and the structure in place to be the church of that size before you actually even get there. And so, like the children's area, for example, I was in a church not too long ago, and we were talking about some of these things, and they said, yeah, we don't, really think we need a check-in system because we know everybody, and everybody knows the parents and the grandparents. And I said, yeah, but if the very first time that a guest does show up, they're going to want to know those systems are in place, and you won't know those people. And so you need to have a check-in system for your church, even if everybody does know everybody and everybody knows who the parents and the grandparents are, because that very first time that a guest does show up, if you don't have those things in place, they're not going to feel comfortable dropping off their kids. And so the security, the safety, background checks on workers, every children's worker needs to have a background check. And I even tell people, you can do it, on some templates, but make a certificate for every person that goes through a background check, put them in a simple frame and hang them on the nursery wall.
Yeah.
And it just shows, hey, we've got, 12 people that have, certified, and then you can call it whatever you want to call it, but it just gives that kind of next level of validation of we're doing our due diligence to make sure your kids are safe. And even posting on the wall in the nursery your cleaning procedure. After every service, the toys are, quarantined until they're washed, with, either a certain temperature of water or with a bleach water, whatever. I mean, there are certain, guidelines for all that stuff that you need to know and check into. But
if it's posted everywhere for the workers, the visitors see it too.
Right.
And then they're kind of, okay, this is a safe place.
Right.
Can we be too friendly?
I think that's a good question. In most cases, I don't think we have to worry about that, but we don't want to be smothering. We don't want to feel desperate for people. I mean, most people, when they come to a church for the first time, they want to kick the tires. They want to walk around and just kind of observe. So, I think anytime ever asking a first-time guest to do anything, even in a class, read a passage of Scripture, some people are not comfortable doing that. I mean, so I don't think we should ever, I think we can be overly friendly. Maybe that's not the right term for that, but I think we need to be careful, about asking people to do things. So I think, you can in some instances. So let people. Some people want to be anonymous, and some people just want to come and check it out. And so I think, you don't want to say, oh, we have to get this information filled out, or,
for you to get the bag.
Yeah. I mean, just, try to be friendly enough to where people feel like, they're wanted there, and you really do appreciate them coming. But at the same time, you're not smothering people and making them feel like you're desperate for new people to be at your church.
And so some churches are in decline, and you can especially see that there. And you can also see it when a young couple comes in, and churches have not seen many young couples. That's where some of that danger would be. And so we want to be careful, not to smother them, and because there are people just kind of want to come in, kind of want to go out, and they're just checking it out, and it's almost like fishing. You are fishing. Right. I think Jesus said something about that. But you're trying not to run them off. You're trying to help them. One thing you kind of alluded to was like, just being there for people, noticing them. So being careful not to get into our kind of our cliques, if you will, talking about what happened the football game or the basketball game last week. And I think sometimes if a church hasn't had visitors much, they tend to get cliquish, and that's also telling me if I want to invite my coworker or my family member, you're not ready for them yet. So being able to do those things helps us a whole lot better.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ransom. We appreciate you stopping by today to do this podcast. We hope to have you back again to talk about some more of these issues. But we encourage all of our folks to go to our website, encourage other folks within your church to listen to this. And we truly are better together when we focus on how we can minister to our community and be more effective in our churches. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.